I'm Fr Rob Taylerson, one of the staff here at St Mary's College, Oscott, where priests are trained. In this Jubilee year, as Pilgrims of Hope, our diocesan companion booklet suggests 6 reflections for the year, the first of which is care for creation. And I'd like to share my reflections on some aspects of this today. I strongly feel that we need to share the truth about creation with everyone. And this means sharing clearly what it means to believe in God as creator. One realization of the importance of this becomes clear if we compare a godless perspective with a God-filled perspective. If there is no God, then nature is not a creation. It is not lovingly brought into being and endowed by purpose by its creator. If that were the case, then life and all nature is propelled only by blind chance. And in such a context, that of God being removed from the picture, our world lacks purpose. Our own motivations might as well be based entirely on personal self-interest. And our increasingly secular world does indeed more often think of all life only as deriving from chemical transfusion of atoms. If there's no such thing as divine creation and no purposeful creation, but only development through random chance, why should we care about other lives ending? Why should we care about environmental pollution, about diminishment of species diversity and natural resources? No, our Christian task is both to teach by giving the true vision of reality, the reality and meaning both of creator and creation, and to live it in our care for our common home. 800 years ago, St Francis of Assisi, in his Canticle of Creation, sang, "Praised be you, my Lord, through our sister, Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, and who produces various fruit with coloured flowers and herbs." Pope Francis in 2015 wrote his great encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si. There he sets the scene for his reflections by turning to this saint whose name he took when he became Pope, St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis was particularly concerned both with creation and with the marginalised, the poor and the outcast. St. Francis had described the elements of creation which he experienced, sun, moon, stars, plants and animals, as his brother and sisters, by virtue of their creation by God. St. Francis had seen that not only Scripture, but also God's creation revealed both God and our purpose in life. And this propelled him to love not only God, but also all of creation, and gave him a special care for people who are poor and marginalised. So Pope Francis reminds us that the world in which we live is not just ours in terms of humanity, but also ours in terms of all other life created by God, in terms of the waters and the rivers and the seas and the air we breathe. Before I became a priest, I was an agricultural scientist and I taught in agricultural colleges. I wanted to help feed the world. I was born in the mid-1950s. At that time, roughly 1 in 4 of the world's population went to bed hungry without having had a substantial meal that day. There were then 2.8 billion people in the world. Today, there are 8.2 billion, and within 3 years, it will be 8.4 billion. So if the good Lord spares me on this earth for 3 more years, the world's population will have trebled in my lifetime. And during this time, when population has trebled, so the world's food production has roughly quadrupled. I deeply rejoice in the increase in world food production. One key hero of mine is Norman Borlaug, who is sometimes called the father of the Green Revolution. Borlaug was brought up on a small unproductive farm in the Midwest of the United States, and during the Great Depression of the 1930s, he, his family and his neighbours learned what it was to feel real hunger. Later, in the mid-20th century, Borlaug led a team of agricultural scientists who developed and introduced high-yielding and disease-resistant cereal varieties using irrigation, fertilizers, pesticides, and efficient storage. His work took him to Mexico, then Pakistan, then India, and his techniques were used to multiply cereal yields in virtually all countries where cereal crops are grown. And his work is thought to have resulted in the keeping alive of approximately 1 billion people who would otherwise have died young due to famine or to diseases associated with malnutrition. He received a Nobel Prize in the early 1970s. So today, despite the population being on the brink of trebling in my lifetime, it is now not 1 in 4, but only 1 in 8 people on Earth who go to bed hungry. It's still far too many. But the progress in feeding the hungry of the world has been far beyond anything imaginable 70 years ago. These changes in agriculture have also brought down the cost of food. When I was born in the mid-50s, 30% of the UK average household income went on food. By the year 2000, the average household in the UK spent under 10% of household income on food shopping, though it has sadly risen a bit since. Reduction in food prices has occurred worldwide, and I am so glad that more of the world's population can afford to eat, and more people now have money left over for medicines, for healthcare, for education, and the dignity that comes from these. Coupled with these advances in food supply and pricing, medical advances and social advances have also provided major humanitarian advances. The world average life expectancy when I was born was just over 48 years. For someone born in 2023, the world average life expected lifespan is now 73. I am so glad that fewer people have had their lives cut short, that more have achieved the scriptural 70 years, or 80 for those who are strong. Many of these advances, I know, have been made by people who've spent their lives selflessly in the service of humankind. In the language of our faith, I would say that the corporal works of mercy have been manifestly evident and effective throughout the world during the course of my lifetime, probably to a degree unsurpassed in human history. The words of chapter 5 of Matthew's Gospel come to mind. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. One of the key paragraphs of Pope Francis in Laudato Si is paragraph 49, which talks of the enlarged world population and that, taking a snapshot of the world's people, the poor are still too often at the bottom of the pile, disregarded. To me, the last sentence of this paragraph is central and most prophetic. It reads, today, however, we have to realize that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice and debates on the environment so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. The blessings of more abundant and more affordable foods still currently has its downsides. Much of the increase in food productivity and the reduction in its cost has been achieved by capturing nitrogen from the air to make it accessible to plant roots as nitrogen fertilizer. This industrial chemistry requires huge amounts of energy. Other large amounts of energy are used in agrochemicals, machinery and transport. So yes, it has required an awful lot of energy to quadruple the world food production. And yes, this is responsible for a significant increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And that trebling world population also inevitably results in more production of greenhouse gases, which were already too high. And not everything about the Green Revolution was good. I know and lament that there was insufficient education on wise use of the new chemicals and varieties. So watercourses have become polluted, some soils have been degraded, and species diversity has been reduced. I am saddened too by the way in which loan sharks devastated some farmers' lives, especially in India, in the financing for small farmers to purchase the new agrochemicals and seeds. The methods used to feed the hungry of the world are still at an early, crude stage. Huge amounts of agricultural research and development is still vital. But I am so glad for what has already been achieved. So many of the world's hungry have been fed and not been left to die. This perspective of mine on feeding the poor is not universally shared. The resulting increase in world population is so often not celebrated as a sign of effective large-scale corporal works of mercy, but rather as foolishness or even a burden, that someone has allowed people, especially the poor, to survive, to be fed and to be healed, and to live out a full human lifespan, as if only the rich in the world, ourselves, should have the right to a full and healthy life. And now, for me, I ask, how is this powerful wave of mercy to be enabled to run its course? The answer is that my daily way of life and yours must be part of a great multitude of people changing their lifestyle to reduce emissions because we love God and we love the earth He created and the poor. My understanding of the science tells me that too many greenhouse gases are being released into the atmosphere, and that the rich nations of the world currently emit per head of population 10 to 20 times the carbon dioxide and other gases than the poor nations. The effects of the world's excessive petrochemical energy use, if we continue, will lead to flood, famine, pestilence, and many more natural disasters, which will promote mass migration, wars, famines, and deaths of hundreds of millions and ultimately billions of human deaths, in addition to massive environmental devastation in this gift of creation, this beautiful world of ours. My life, our lives, must be simplified, must use less energy, must care for this world and all created life on it, with a determination and intensity that will allow our world and our poor to flourish. My cry from the heart is, live simply, tread lightly on this earth, that the poor may be fed and live with dignity, and that God's beautiful creation may flourish.